Today's presentation is called Raining on Your Parade. Um, and it's about parade risk management. Well, what do we talk about? In Utah, we love a parade, right? This is Utah's parades are awesome, right? We have the Days of 47 and a lot of other really cool parades that happen out there. What? I'm lying. I don't like parades. For me personally, I'd rather get sunburned somewhere else. But a lot of people in Utah like parades, and they think it's a great activity that it builds community um, unity, that we come together as a community. It's good entertainment, and it's a perception of our communities, of who we are. And I get all of that stuff. It's just not for me. There are a couple of parades that I go to. One of those is a car show where they drive the parades up and down Main Street in a town, and the other is the 24th of July parade in my community. And it's a dandy parade because they go around the church twice. And that's the extent of the parade, and then I can go home and do something else. Well, here's the deal. Parades are awesome or boring depending on your perception of those things, but parades can be risky. Unfortunately, around the country, I was actually, I study a lot of things, and I deal with claims, and I've dealt with a lot of accidents and injuries and things over my career. As I studied up on parade accidents around the country and around the world, I was quite aghast at what all has happened over the years. Multiple fatality events, um, situations where people were electrocuted because their float came in contact with power lines that were above the parade route. Um, uh, Parade floats or trailers that were hit by trains as the parade crossed the railroad tracks. I was frankly aghast. And unfortunately, here in the state of Utah, we have had a number of serious, fatal parade accidents over the years. And one of the reasons why I work at the trust is a commitment that I have made of no dead kids. If adults want to do dumb things, I'm live and let live and let die, right? If people want to do that, but I don't want a community, I don't want a state where we have serious hazards to children. And so that's one of the commitments that I've made in my career, is to help prevent accidents that injure or kill children. And that's one of the major reasons why we focus on this, is because we've had kids die in multiple different parade accidents around the state, and these are preventable fatalities that, if we'll do the right things, we can prevent those. All right. So how do we have fun and not hurt people? I know there are folks out there right now saying, "Yeah, you really are raining on the parade. You're going to take all the fun out of it, and it's not going to be the type of event that we want." Well, I think we can have fun and keep people safe at the same time. We've just got to be smart about it. We need to be intentional in our parade safety and plan good events and execute those events right. Um, there's some guides out there for this. In the past, I've just put together things that I felt were really important around this. I want to make available a guide. This is from some of the organizations that you pertain to, probably the National Association of Counties, the National League of Cities, and also the International City and County Management Association. These are great organizations, and they put this guide together, and I'll send it out to everybody that signed up for this webinar in the follow-up email. It's a pretty simple thing. It doesn't go into everything, but it hits some major categories that are critical in planning a safe parade and making sure the event comes off right. And so my information today will take the form, the order that they use, and then I'm throwing in some of the stuff that I find as important as well as what I've found in their materials. So here are the different elements that we'll talk about. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, but just going rehearsing those. But we want to talk about organization. Who is responsible for our parade? Sometimes it's us, right? Sometimes it's the city, sometimes it's the county, the town that is responsible. It's your event. In that case, well, you own everything, right? You own all of the risks and all of the upside and downside to that event that's happening. Sometimes it's an organizer that comes in. They say, hey, we want to be able to close down Main Street in town and have our parade for whatever the event is or whatever the organization is. And some of you have made decisions to allow those, and some have said no. Um, but when an outside organizer comes in, we have an obligation to ensure that they are doing things right. No matter who is running the event, they need to do it right and they need to do it safely. We need to know what our risks are around this event as well. If alcohol is involved in the event, which not a lot of your parades or events around the state of Utah involve alcohol, that's not social or not part of our culture in many parts of the state, and so it's not a problem. But if we do have it, that amplifies the potential downsides. Just because people's inhibitions are down, and if people are drinking and potentially driving floats, well, that makes our risk a lot higher. As like I said, as I was looking at these incidents that had happened around the country, several of those really terrible ones involved alcohol consumption. Um, Instant command system. Have we built a system to be able to organize this event and be able to respond to emergencies? Does that group that's coming in to have their own parade on our facilities, do they have an organizational system that is capable of managing an event to whatever scale that you're talking about? Communication. I'm going to talk about that 6 different times in here, but adequate lines of communication so we don't miss something, we don't miss an opportunity to get the information out, and then being prepared for the worst. Ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen, and then prepare for that. Okay. Regulations and requirements. My recommendation is if you are a city or town or county and you're allowing parades to happen, I would codify that. I would put, if there are specific rules about how parades happen that need to be in law, in legal terms, and have the force of law, codify that, do that. Aside from that, let's specify in our permit process exactly what the rules are and make those rules available so nobody has any excuse to say, well, we didn't know. Make sure that we have contracts that are signed that say what we expect and what the organizers or the participants participating in this event need to do. All right, we want our key contacts. Like I said, I'm going to talk about communication a lot. We need to have a readily available list, probably on your website, of our contacts in our organization. Public safety contacts. If an outside entity is trying to organize an event and they need to have public safety, fire, EMS, and law enforcement available, they need access to those people or the people that would be guiding that process and providing officers or others to help out. Railroad. Some of you out there are saying, what? Railroad officials, what do we have to do that for? This picture here came from Texas, where a parade was passing across a railroad right of way when a freight train came through and smashed into this trailer that was carrying a bunch of veterans. People were killed, people were injured. If we're crossing railroad rights of way, we need to be able to contact those officials. There are specific rules and regulations around railroad rights of way. and we need to follow those. How about state roads? Well, if it is a UDOT road, we have to deal with the UDOT rules on that. And so that should be part of our process as well. So if an outside organization or agency comes in and wants to organize a parade on Main Street that comes through town, but it's a UDOT facility, well, or a state road, they have to deal with UDOT on that as well as dealing with our local regulations as well. And we want to make that as simple as possible so they know what's up. And also other places like hospitals, emergency resources, that information should be easily to get to. Once again, communication. Easy to access the numbers, and in an emergency, how do we get the word out to people? So what is our plan around that? If we have an emergency, a float catches on fire and we need to cancel the parade because of some tragedy that happens or something like that, then we need to way to communicate not only with the participants in the parade, but also the spectators. And so having routes like the local radio station or a Twitter channel or whatever the route, social media, where we can get the information out quickly and accurately, that is an important part of our planning. All right. Dedicated channels. Do we have radio frequencies that we will use only for our event folks? What happens in an emergency? Who can operate on those channels, and do we have adequate to do what we're doing? Here's a quick video here of how not to do it. We put a whole bunch of kids, teenagers, onto a semi trailer, and then we have them stand up until the driver hits the air brakes and they almost fall off. Could that have been a fatality? Pretty easily. So let's make a plan. That's really our job, is to plan ahead so we have a fun event and we avoid some of these really nasty problems that could happen there. So here are those topics that came from that document that I recommended, that I will be sending out. These are the different categories, and we're going to run through these quickly. I told you it wasn't going to take that long for this presentation today, and then I started putting it together, and I'm like, I'm going to have to go fast because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. Security. This is one that wasn't on that original list, but I think it's important. We need to have adequate security for the event that we have. A lot of times we have a perception, that's for the big cities, right? That's not something that's going to happen here, that we'll have somebody go crazy, or we'll have somebody do something that is unexpected. Well, we need to plan security for whatever events that we have, and parades in particular, because we bring a lot of people there, and we can have things get out of control when we bring people together into a group. So it needs to be adequate for the event. If it's something that is, maybe we have different viewpoints on this parade. There's something about it that one faction in the community thinks it's great and the other thinks it's a terrible thing. Well, there's a potential for conflict there, and so we're going to up our security for that. So a frank discussion about what type of security we should have is important in the planning stages. Involving the public safety people as well is incredibly important at this point, because guess what? They're trained to deal with those types of events, and they can give us critical information on facilities, people, structures, risks. They can help out a lot in our preparation for that. Physical barriers. How do we keep people where they're supposed to be? Unfortunately, we have seen some parades around the country be the site of a terrorist event, or an event where somebody intentionally runs a vehicle into a bunch of people. How do we control access to these areas Once again, that comes down to really relying on our public safety professionals out there to help us with that. If it's a really big event, a massive event, or something that is highly contentious in the community, we may want to bring in outside security resources to consult with us and help us plan for that type of event. Make sure our local officers are trained to handle large crowds. Make sure they're trained on how to spot suspicious activity, so they can be on the lookout for bad things that might occur there, or people looking to do bad things. All right, plan your route. So a lot of times you're like, well, duh, we plan it. We drive down Main Street in town. That's where the parade goes. I get it. But sometimes our route can really put us into a bad situation. We talked about that crash where they were crossing a railroad. Stay away from railroads. Don't even go down that route if you have to cross a railroad right of way. And believe me, once you contact the railroad and talk about taking a parade across there, you're going to be hit with a lot of requirements um, that you probably aren't going to want to deal with. So let's just plan that ahead of time. If we can avoid that railroad, or we can avoid that area that's a problem, that's good. Make sure the route is adequate for the vehicles. If we have low-hanging power lines and we have tall floats, that's not a good combination. If we have a hill that um, has a crown top where we have to go over a hill or railroad tracks or whatever, some obstacle there, and our floats can't make it past it, well, that's a real problem. And so let's plan ahead for our route, plan for traffic, plan for parking, all the things that go along with an event. And then share that with the participants so they understand all the requirements, all the rules when they go to a parade. When spectators go to a parade, they understand where they're supposed to park and where it's appropriate to stand, and all of those things. How early they should arrive, and if they can save spots ahead of time. We'll talk about that in a minute. I want to talk about vehicles. We use vehicles in parades, whether it's a float that's mechanized, or the Shriners with their little dune buggies that had a problem, mechanical problem, and crashed into the spectators. We want to look at those vehicles and ensure that they're okay um, for the uh, for the type of operation that we're doing, for the type of event that we're doing. We want to verify this. Participants in the parade need to have insured vehicles. Pretty simple thing. If they make a mistake there, their liability insurance should be on the hook for that. If we allow people to bring the type of vehicles that are not insured into our parades, well, that makes it hard, because this person may not have any ability to pay for the damage that they've caused. Establish speed limits, which are really slow, right? Um, Make sure the vehicles are safe. Is the height, the configuration of that, is the visibility appropriate? A lot of times we have these floats and the driver is down, not always, but these are the old school floats that we had. The driver was underneath everything, and they had a little porthole that they looked out, or very low visibility. That's a problem. They need to be able to see, and they need to be able to communicate with the occupants of the float, or the occupants on a trailer back behind. These vehicles have to have the ability to safely operate. So we used to have a vehicle safety inspection requirement in the state. We don't have that. Normally, I would say that, but we don't have that option anymore. But people should be notified ahead of time. These vehicles need to meet certain requirements. They need to be safe. And don't forget things like fire. When we start putting together floats, those floats can be flammable many times. And so in our documentation that we give out, it's best to say that they build their floats out of non-flammable materials, that they have a fire extinguisher available in those vehicles if they're afloat or something like that, that could combust. Some things like carbon monoxide have been a problem, and people have been seriously injured because the exhaust didn't exhaust out of the float, and the driver or other participants ended up with severe carbon monoxide exposure. Other things. Hey, Mike, if there are any questions or anything like that I need to catch up on, please just grab me at any point.
Nope, no questions.
We're all good.
I'll
Great.
let you know though.
Okay. Drivers. So when we have people driving vehicles in the parade, we want to ensure that they are safe drivers. Well, I'll tell you, I was impacted as I researched this. I saw some really tragic parade accidents that happened around where drivers got out of control, where they were under the influence of alcohol or various different problems. Let's make sure that in our documentation, all the drivers need to be licensed for the type of vehicle that they're driving. They need to have, if it's a commercial vehicle that would require a CDL, they better have a CDL when they're operating in our parades. Do we have specific age requirements? I tried to find this picture. I've got a picture somewhere of me as a high school senior driving my Jeep CJ5 with a little tiny trailer on behind with a bunch of people riding on it, and the back of my Jeep full of people in the homecoming parade. Couldn't find the picture. But is it appropriate to have teenagers driving vehicles in parades? I'll leave that out there for you to make a decision on that. But I don't think I would want to have teenagers operating vehicles in a parade. We want to convey these requirements once again and be very serious about this. If you don't follow the rules, you're not in the parade. We don't want to have any problems, and so if you're speeding, if you're doing burnouts, you're out. We'll stop your vehicle and we'll pull you to the side of the road, and you're going to spend the rest of the parade stopped there waiting for the parade to end. We're serious about the safety of our parade. We're not going to take any guff about it. All right, participants. This is where the majority of the accidents in the state of Utah have happened, and really around the country. It's with people interacting with vehicles, riders on floats or in the back of pickup trucks, and they fall out or step off or walk up to a vehicle and get run over by the vehicle. So a few rules around that. Number one, if you have a truck pulling a trailer, as in this picture here, don't have anybody riding in the bed of the truck, and have a rule that they cannot get in the bed of the truck if it's pulling a trailer. Why? People lose their minds when they're in a when they're a parade for some reason, and they think they can tightrope walk down the hitch or tongue of that trailer back and forth from the truck to the float, and they slip off and they end up under the tires of the trailer. Let's just make a hard and fast rule on this. If you're pulling a trailer, nobody in the bed of the truck. Nobody gets in or out of the vehicle once the parade starts. That means nobody gets on or off of the trailer. Nobody gets in and out of the truck. Once you're there, you're set. That's where we run into these deadly situations, is when we get people interacting with the vehicle, getting in and out with a lot of things going on, and the driver not able to watch everything at the same time. Candy is a big part of having a fun parade. The kids love it. They love to have candy thrown out there, and they run out and they grab it to see who can get the most. Well, that's also a situation where we can get dead kids. Kids run over. And so a few things that we need to put in place for candy. I'm not saying don't do candy, but walkers should only give the candy out. We shouldn't be throwing candy from vehicles, from floats, anything like that. So if that organization or group that has that float or vehicle wants to distribute candy, it needs to be done by walkers. Now they can walk along the side. We can't have them going up to refill candy. They should have whatever they're going to give out with them at the start of the parade. So they're not going in and out of the truck or um, getting materials, because that driver may not be able to see them and we can get them run over. Walkers are a great benefit to us because they can keep the crowd at bay, right? So our walkers should be trained that as they walk, they stay out towards the edges of the road. They don't get close to the vehicles, and they force the kids back. If the kids start moving further out, throw the candy behind the kids. So it's back behind them, and we move them back. Communicate that with the crowd as well, so they understand that where they're supposed to be. I've seen some of your organizations out there put down temporary lines, put a white line that says nobody beyond this line, and I think that's great. In other places, I've seen actually putting up these, we called them bike barricades in my event days, along the parade route, just to keep people back. The people in the in the vehicles need to be able to communicate. I told you I'm going to talk about communication a lot, whether that's by walkie-talkie or it could be a cell phone, um, kept open all the time. The driver needs to be able to communicate with the trailer or the vehicle behind, so we have quick response if something goes wrong. How about the people participating on a trailer? Well, do we need to have handrails for that? Well, in it would be best. Now, I know that's not always possible, but whatever that float is, or trailer or whatever, needs to have the ability of those people to be braced or sit down on a secure area so they don't fall off the vehicle. If you have people standing without something like that, it ought to have a handrail around there that would prevent people from falling off the vehicle. Okay, and I know that's frustrating to some people out there, but it's serious business that we're talking about. How about animals? So animals are a part of parades, and even animals that as well trained and seasoned as the Budweiser Clydesdales sometimes get out of control at a parade. Unfortunately, in that video there, they had barricades along the side, and people were pretty well controlled, but that could have gotten ugly. I found some. I only had room for just a couple of videos in here, but I found some pretty ugly um, accidents that happened with animals at parades. So we've got to go into that with our eyes open to the potential problems with animals. And I'm not saying no animals, but we got to be smart about how we do it. If how many animals, are they healthy? Are there any issues with the animals? Are they appropriate for this type of event? If I have an animal that gets spooked by loud noises, by sirens, by people yelling, that animal shouldn't be in a parade. If the type of environment that they're going to be in is going to be a problem for that animal, they shouldn't be there. And I know that's hard to really put out and say, because everybody says, "Oh, my horse is so gentle," or "My dog will never bite," all of those things. But we have to be realistic. If we see an animal having a problem, a horse gets spooked, let's take action on that and pull that person aside and say, we probably ought to take this animal out of the parade. Don't put the horses by the fire. No, don't put fireworks in your parades. But what I was trying to get at is, don't put your animals in an area where they're going to get spooked, right by the fire engines, right by the I'm trying to think of sometimes we have the mountain men or whatever shooting their muzzle loaders. That's a whole other subject that we ought to talk about as well. Don't put the animals where they could get into problems. All right. Assembly and disassembly. How do people get involved in the parade? Where do they go? When do they get there? How do they access the area? all of those things. We need to be very, very clear on this, what the requirements are, and we also need to have no exceptions on that. Somebody shows up late and they want to jump into the parade partway through. No way. And we need to close off those accesses so people can't do that, because that's where we run into problems. So we want to be really clear. If you're not here on time, you're not in the parade. If you don't report where you're supposed to report in the order you're supposed to report, sorry, you're not there. You're not able to be in that. Okay. All right. Viewing locations along the parade route. Where can people stand? And we want to communicate that ahead of time. When can they get there? Can they go out and throw some blankets or folding chairs down and save that location? I would want to be really clear about those things. Can they bring in some scaffolding? I've seen that at various parades around the state where people will set up some scaffolding, and and so they can stand under it and have a little bit of shade, and they put the kids up on top of the scaffolding to be able to watch the parade. Now that's some ingenuity there to be able to effectively watch a parade, but is it safe? And so I would just say, let's be clear about what's appropriate for people, where they can be, where they shouldn't be, all of those things. Parking it goes along with that as well. If we're bringing in temporary viewing locations, platforms, and that, let's use our building officials and ensure that they are safe and appropriate for the number and type of use that they're going to get, number of people and type of use. Insurance. If we have organizers coming in to bring an event into our city, town, county, whatever we are, they need to bring their insurance along. They need to provide a certificate of insurance to you, listing your organization as an additional insured. You're allowing them to use your facilities, and you can make that an obligation, and not just you must make that an obligation for them, or you're exposing your organization to far more risk. And so where can they get that insurance if they don't have it? Well, number one, I would be a little more skeptical of the organization if they don't have insurance. But however, there are resources out there that you can buy short-term policies to give you liability or give an organization liability coverage for a one-day event or a short-term event, so they can get that. But we want to, if an organization is coming into our facility or our city, county, and they want to put an event like this on, they need to bring coverage with them. Make sure the vehicles that are in the parade are insured, have adequate coverage for that. Now, I know we're not going to go out and check every individual vehicle. However, that should be part of the participant agreement, that they have that coverage in place. If we have vendors along the course there, they also should provide their coverage certificate of insurance to cover you as well. Okay, lots of stuff we've talked about, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to clean up. There's going to be some garbage around there and maybe some horse poop and things like that. Who cleans it up? Who pays for it? Well, if we don't have that in our agreement with the organizer that's coming in, guess what? You may end up on the hook. And if you do, who pays for that? So that needs to be very clear ahead of time. Do they need to haul that garbage away? Who's providing the garbage receptacles for that? Who's providing the porta potties? Are they required? All of these things should be part of our parade planning, and really a mass gathering event, depending on the size of it. There's specific regulations for that under state code. If it is a mass gathering, we pretty much have to provide an ambulance. Have those there, because the type of materials that are required. You can do it without an ambulance, but it's kind of hard not to. So if it's a mass gathering, we got to have those resources in place. And just to wrap up, sorry I went a little longer than than I had promised on that. Just to wrap up, plan for success. We can have a great event if we plan ahead, if we know our hazards, if we look for those and think outside of the box. What's the worst thing that could happen in this event? Inspect, identify those problems, get out there. I know we got a lot of things going, so we've got to have the resources. We got to identify those. I want you out taking a look at what's going on, what the floats look like, any issues with people there, and take action. If you find a problem, identify, fix that stuff, whatever we identify. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Take action when you see a problem. All right, tons of stuff that we covered in this session. What do you got out there for questions? Please type those into the chat box, and we'd be happy to answer those now. Mike, anything I bumbled on or anything I missed?
No, that was great. I mean, it's all you touched on it right at the first that, man, why are we doing this in January? But now's the time to plan. Now's the time to get ahead of it, get those policies in place, get those codes in place if we need it. I think that's a fantastic point. We're looking at codifying some of these regulations, because you've got folks who want to argue every single little thing. Well, we've done it this way for, hundreds of years or whatever it is. When we codify those things now in the eye of safety, now we got something to stand on. So I love that.
For sure. Yeah, folks, if I made you mad, if there's something you want to argue about, I would love to have the discussion. Here's the other side of it as well. If you found something that works really well for you, if you have a parade safety plan that you think is the bomb, it's the best thing, send it to me, particularly if you're willing to share. That's one of the great things about it being in government service is we can share and steal and borrow all of those things back and forth and get better as a state. So if you've got something that works for you and has been effective, I would love to see that. I'll send out some information to you that I have found over the years as well. And I'd love to have a dialogue on this.
So we do have a question, Jason. Megan asked, how would you recommend the large crowds for protruding into the parade route for candy, even with walkers, and without the expense of barriers down the entire route?
Yeah, that's a challenging thing, and in some some cases it may have been a problem in the past. And so you may know what the issue and where the issue is. And so instead of putting barricades down the entire parade route, maybe there's a specific location that you could put some barricades in that would keep people back. The other thing is a training thing. If people are protruding out into the roadway, don't train everybody. No candy. And really, and I say throw candy, and that's wrong. The walker should be handing the candy out. Throwing has potential to cause us issues. If I got walkers, it's better because you're out away from the vehicles. But I don't want errant candy going out into the roadway where a child can be run over. So yeah, that's a challenging thing, but it would be one of those things that I would say we've got to hold a pretty good line on that. And once again, if this is a large event, we're probably going to have some public safety folks there. We'll probably have some officers, and use them. Those officers should be walking the parade route or have a specific area that they are handling, and they should be really strong on that. Hey, if you want this parade to happen again, you have to abide by the rules. So.
And Jason, I think you made a good point earlier in talking about maybe there's maybe you could do like a temporary painted barrier or something like that on the ground that says, you can't come past this far. Have some kind of a buffer zone between where the chairs are and where the road is. That we don't want people being at just a simple paint job with field paint that you use on your fields for your soccer fields and things like that. That could work out really well too.
Yeah. It's just the challenge of herd mentality. If somebody starts crossing the line, that's where it can become more of a challenge. We may have to go more physical barriers or using some resources to to move people back.
Mhm.
I see some chats, but I can't see what they are. Are there any other
Oh,
questions
just
that we have?
just folks chiming in. I think educating the public a couple of weeks before the event
Yeah.
is important. Um, Copy of the slides. Yeah, we'll send out a copy of the slides for sure to everyone who signed up, Seth. So we will get these out to you for sure, along with the document that the Jason referenced that has those recommendations from the National League of Cities.
Yeah. Folks, this is, these are one of those fun things, the fun events that we do in our communities. And we're not trying to rain on the parade. We just want this to be a fun activity and not go into tragedy, because it can happen in seconds if we're not paying attention to the details here and doing the right things. And we can still have fun events and do it right. And I'd love to have that discussion with you. Folks, thanks for all you do out there. Appreciate all of your efforts to make Utah a safer place. Just remember, this is for the kids, and we want to ensure that we're taking care of them, so we keep them safe, and we can have a safer Utah. Everybody go out and have a safe day. Thanks.